And then I got more and more attached as more children came into our care. I'd got more and more attached to the children, more attached to the dogs. And then some would die and it would break your heart and you would think how easy it would be if I could just be detached again, because then I wouldn't have a broken heart when they die. But then you come to that epiphany moment where you realize, I'm attaching myself to as many people as possible here. I'm giving my heart to all of these children, some of which are sick, and I know my heart's going to get broken from it. I'm giving my heart to these rescue dogs and rescuing dogs in Tanzania. Last year, more than 20 died in our care from various illnesses. It's not an easy thing, but you keep putting your heart into it. You keep attaching to it, and the more you do, you realize that you're getting closer to Source. And when you realize that you're attaching to everything and making yourself so vulnerable, in doing so, is making you closer to Mother, Father, Creator, closer to Source, closer to God. And you realize that when you sat alone in the forest and you detached from everything as much as you could for years on end, that you were getting closer to Mother, Father, Creator. You realize that whichever path you choose, both are bringing you close to Mother, Father, Creator. Both are drawing you closer to God.
With the wind up through the soles of my feet into my lungs you go, meditation of an ancient kind.
Hi everyone. I am alone and getting deep in meditation today, and very much needed for myself at the moment. But while I'm doing that, I'm also at the point where many of you know I'm awaiting for the birth of my son. Now, this made me want to speak on a very important topic, and that is the spiritual path and the family path, and attachment and detachment, and how do they join together? Most spiritual teachers on the planet are single, and sometimes it's very easy as a single person to say this is what you should do. You should find at least 2 hours a day to sit on your meditation pillow and get deep into meditation, and that's great, but what if you've got children running around? Of course, it just can't happen. In most practical family lives, it can't happen. You can't do it. You should make time for it. We should always make time to re-energize ourselves so as we can give more back to our children. And meditation is a perfect way to do that. Fasting is another option as well that we can partake in to do that. All of these spiritual pursuits, but mental governance via the method of meditation is definitely of huge benefit to your ability to be more involved with your family because you have more energy to give to them. However, in my life, I lived at one end of consciousness, and by that, excuse me, my friend Sarah used to joke, she helped me out of my monastery. I lived a monastic life, and by that, I was literally just fasting and praying and meditating and alone in nature all of the time. And I was so detached from society, it was very hard to come back to it. And anything that wasn't in that natural flow and rhythm of life, I was kind of put off by. People living from the carnal mind didn't work well with my energy back then. But I am not a Buddha, and I would say if I preferred the concept of touching that space of super consciousness, infinite consciousness, that cosmic consciousness that all great teachers, all mystics have experienced, and I too have experienced in my life, that I would rather come back and tell people about it, and that would be the path of a bodhisattva, to return and to share with others that place and to guide them and say, hey, go touch it and then come back to your life, because renouncing the world is, for me, not an option. How can I renounce the world and sit in a state of nirvana when I know people are suffering? It doesn't work for me, and that's why I speak much more highly of the path of a bodhisattva than I do of a Buddha. I find renouncing the world somehow bowing out on the problems of the world, which for some it's fine. There's no right way to do it. I just warm in my morality towards the bodhisattva path. Now, I did sit on the fringes of consciousness. I was completely detached from everything. And because of that, I was drawing closer and closer to Source on that journey. And I spent a long time doing that, a long time alone in nature, years, just not having any strong bonds or friendships anymore because they were all built on substances and drugs or the way of life that I didn't want anymore. And I was just in solitude. And the more I detached, the closer I got to spirit. But then when I went to Tanzania, I realized that state of detachment couldn't carry me in service. And I realized something very important, because when I got to Tanzania, I started to attach myself to as much as I could. Every extra dog I rescued, I realized that I was sentencing myself emotionally to love this being and to provide for this being. And it also anchored me into Tanzania. At first I was only rescuing dogs and I was helping children get into school and out of child labour. But every extra person, every being I helped anchored me further. And I realised that I couldn't be detached. I had to be attached to my location because these other sentient beings were now becoming dependent upon my attachment to that area. And then, of course, children started to come into my life. And when you live full time with children who are sick and you spend day and night with children that they're not biologically your own, but they in your heart are your own, and they call you father and you call them your son and you tell them, I'll be your father, I'm happy to take that role, I take that responsibility because there's no one else to take it, I'll do it because it's the right thing to do. And you become so attached to the children, and then you become so attached to that which you've built. I built a village. My heart, my creativity went into the village from everything. Everything has a story. I remember every pipeline, every mistake, every leaky roof, every electrical switch that doesn't work. I got attached to all of it. I got attached to all of it. The whole of Share Tanzania, the staff, I got so unbelievably attached to it. And then I got more and more attached as more children came into our care. I'd got more and more attached to the children, more attached to the dogs. And then some would die and it would break your heart and you would think how easy it would be if I could just be detached again, because then I wouldn't have a broken heart when they die. But then you come to that epiphany moment where you realize I'm attaching myself to as many people as possible here. I'm giving my heart to all of these children, some of which are sick, and I know my heart's going to get broken from it. I'm giving my heart to these rescue dogs and rescuing dogs in Tanzania. Last year, more than 20 died in our care from various illnesses. It's not an easy thing, but you keep putting your heart into it. You keep attaching to it, and the more you do, you realize that you're getting closer to Source. And when you realize that you're attaching to everything and making yourself so vulnerable, in doing so, is making you closer to Mother, Father, Creator, closer to Source, closer to God. And you realize that when you sat alone in the forest and you detached from everything as much as you could for years on end, that you were getting closer to Mother, Father, Creator. You realize that whichever path you choose, both are bringing you close to Mother, Father, Creator. Both are drawing you closer to God. Now, how does that translate when you have a family life? How does your spiritual practice look? What is the end goal of spiritual practice for you? Is it just to have more vibrance and to live your life better? In which case you can take time to get down in meditation. You can take time for that. Or you could also take time in the physical world to take your children and teach them deep moral truths. That can be your spiritual practice. Forget the movie, forget the cinema, take them to the homeless shelter. Take them out and do something out of the ordinary that shouldn't be out of the ordinary. Take them out and show them this is the life that some people lead. They are lost, perhaps through their own decisions they got here, perhaps through just bad luck they got here. You could end up there too. And if you do end up in such a place, it's always good that other human beings extend a hand of charity towards you to try and get you back on your feet. Take your children out and show them that lesson. When's the last time you ever felt that you should show your children that lesson? That's spiritual practice in family life. It absolutely is. Teach your children to meditate with you. Show them how you can control your emotions. You don't have to suffer in your emotions. You don't have to suffer in your thoughts. Teach them. Show them it. Share in it. But you must find a union where you understand that spiritual practice is not just for the yogi sitting alone. And the spiritual journey of a yogi can learn a lot from a family person. I'm a family man now. Whether I like it or not, I'm having my new baby born shortly, but I've got so many kids in Tanzania who call me dad and come to me with dad problems. I'm a family man. And my spiritual practice, I love nothing more than being with the children. I truly do. But if I want to be able to cope with it, I need also time alone, so as I can align myself and center myself and have control over my mind as best as I can. And with it, my joy, which means I can help more children because I have more joy to give to the world. So, the end goal of most spiritual practice is self-improvement to live a more vibrant life. But what's the end goal of that? Well, eventually the end goal of that comes to the point where you say we should make the world a better place. Surely, if it's good for us, why shouldn't it be good for others as well? And in which case you have to realize that the world needs people to do that. God can't fix the problems of this planet. Creator can't fix the problems of the planet without a person to work through. And unless we start creating inside our society that side of spirituality where we teach our children moral lessons every week, we get together and do something, we ensure there's a community going on as well. All of these things I see are so important and perhaps missing from the West, and I think it's just creating an integration of spiritual life into the Western way of life as well. And that can happen with churches and mosques and so on and so forth. That much I agree with 100%, and long may it continue to do so. But for many people, spirituality as a family person seems completely impossible because they only have a short amount of time to sit silent. But that's not the only pursuit of spirituality. And those who sit in a great silence and see a great light, they don't necessarily become any more enlightened than the person who doesn't sit in great silence and is constantly attaching themselves to the service of their children and people around them and trying to better the planet. Both procure profound wisdom and learning, and both can learn from one another because both paths lead to the same thing. So that's my thing with spiritual practice and family life, is we need to get creative and adapt it, because maybe you can't sit quiet and meditate and discipline yourself. You should 100% find time to do that because it'll give you more energy for your children. But how does it reflect if you're raising children? Well, raise them with the higher qualities is what I would say. And if you don't have something in your life, there are opportunities to do that. You can go and volunteer with your children. And I think that's a very beautiful lesson that should be instilled in all children's lives. But believe me, if you have a child and you feel that that's it, your chance of pursuing nirvana has gone, you're completely mistaken, because in that silence you get closer to source. But in the attachment of your love for your children and your family and whatever around you, you will also grow closer to source, just via a different path. So you don't have to go into the silence. You can go into the attachment. Attachment and detachment. The great silence of meditation, or the great bustle of service. They'll both take you back to Creator. So get creative. How are you going to raise your child differently in a spiritual sense now that you know that you're going to have this being around you? You're going to have them with you 24/7. Are they able to sit quietly with you while you meditate? If not, then let someone watch them while they can, or do it while they're learning. But how are you going to raise your child so as your concept of a spiritual life, or the expression of the higher qualities of humanity, which doesn't have to be labelled spiritual necessarily, is expressed in the way you're raising your child? and is expressed in your family unit and in your family life. And that's all we have to do. I'm not the one to tell you how to do that. We can all creatively work out how we should be doing that, and we can all see practically if we're already doing that or not. So, God bless, guys. I think I'll speak more on those lines because it's very easy to listen to spiritual teachers who are single on the planet, but what they teach doesn't reflect as something that can work in the life of a family man or a family woman with a great many responsibilities in the physical world. But it doesn't mean that you can't practically meditate while you're doing these things. And I think that's what I'm gearing towards. I'll do some videos about, while you're busy in family life, how do you pursue a spiritual practice? Well, how do you get into a meditative state? And there are tricks and tips that you can do, so I'll do a video on that as well. But for now, I just wanted to set it up, I think. God bless, guys. Bye. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, as it really helps us to grow the channel and with it help more children here in Tanzania. Also, don't forget you can support our work by sharing with children in crisis here, be it sharing for a particular need or even sharing one-on-one support for education, housing, food and medical care. It can be done for as little as the cost of a cup of coffee a week back in the West after all. Just visit www.sharetanzania.co.uk to find out more. Lastly, remember you can also support us via Patreon, www.patreon.com/featherstail, and help keep us here in Tanzania to continue our work. The links for the website and for the Patreon are in the description box of this video. Love and light, guys. See you soon.